So the first question is, so really, who are you and what do you do?
John Jones. I help to lead the Experience Center at PwC. So I've been in design for over 20 years. So the challenges that I like are the things that help to simplify complexity.
Great, and then what did, so in context of Access Map, then how were you involved?
So we met, I can say, as Jason and I met a while ago. We were connected through people we knew at Parsons. There was an interview years ago that that was focused on a VR wheelchair study that we were doing, trying to help build that into something that felt like a wheelchair training program, people with their first day in their wheelchair. We stayed in touch, and I've always been a fan of the filmmaking work that you've done, and also the work on Access Map. And at some point, it made sense for us to try to improve some of that stuff together.
The point where we were in touch for so long that you changed companies.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, we kept on trying. It's like a recurring theme or an undercurrent of just staying in touch and working on stuff together. So it's nice that we're able to maintain that from one place to the next.
Well, my philosophy has always been, if first you don't succeed, try again, and that is yours.
Yeah. Yep, we did that.
That's right. Someone must say it says recording.
Yes, recording.
It's okay, cool. Okay. So the next question is what? So really, so what was your involvement in Access Map? And let's talk about the rating system and why it's unique, and really delve into the three-part story and things.
Yep. So when we were looking at Access Map, as it was before, there was a lot of great data in there, but it was hard for people to rate, and sometimes hard for people to read what some of those ratings might be. So what we did is we kind of reassessed the data and saw that there was a way to show people the experience that they might have in a place by collapsing it into a three-part story. So I think where that's really strong, especially for somebody like Jason, who's a filmmaker, is that that the story of your visit to a place has a beginning and a middle and an end. I think is a great starting point, and it allowed us to look at all of the things that people might encounter in a place by looking at it through that lens. So anything about the entry to the space, anything about a ramp, is there a permanent ramp, is there a temporary ramp, are there steps on the way in? That was all about the beginning of the story. And then the middle of the story, it was all about how could you navigate the space. What was the lighting like? Is there too much sound? Is there room to move in there with a wheelchair? And then the third part of the story was the restroom experience. Is what was the restroom like? Not in terms of the star ratings, but what we discovered when we took apart the star ratings is that there were very specific details that anyone could rate. Does the door swing out or in? Are there handrails around the toilet? Is there room for a second person? Is there a sink? So what we were able to do then is take that really simple three-part story for the person who would be using Access Map to very quickly look at how is my story going to be going into the place, and then also how do I rate it with really simple binary decisions. Is there a permanent ramp? Yes or no. Is it a temporary ramp? Yes or no. Is the opening wide enough? Yes or no. So what we did is we took the some of the anxiety out of rating, both for people who are wheelchair users, but also for anyone to be able to recognize some of those things. So we put that into the rating system as simple yes, no questions in order to simplify the ratings, but also to provide a little bit of education so that people can see, well, why is a ramp important? Why is the door opening important? Why are these restroom characteristics important? So that people could not only rate yes or no, but also see the really simple reason why it's important.
I really love that AccessMap went from the 5-star rating system, which was unspecific, to something more specific as a binary yes or no. So, what was the? Can you talk a little bit about the inspiration behind that? So, why did you suggest a binary versus a 5-star system?
Well, one of the things that when I was looking at the 5-star system, one of the things that I started to do is to try to figure out how would I rate a place with the 5-star system. And then what I started to discover is that within the 5-star system, there were a lot of yes/no questions in that rating system that were hard to figure out. So I couldn't figure out how to rate something 1 to 5 stars. But what I could figure out is that the instructions that were given in there, when you break them down, it turns out that they were yes/no questions. So by really trying to deeply understand what was built into the 5-star rating system, we discovered that there were a lot of yes/no questions in there. And in fact, when we started to take the rest of the system apart, we looked at how there were all yes/no questions in there, as long as we were able to help people identify what is the thing that they're looking for, and then be able to break it down in that way.
Great. And then, so where did the color choices come from? So the 3-part story of blue, yellow, and red.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've seen about green, as an example, is it's people sometimes certain colors they don't actually read what's under them because they think they know what the color means already. So I've always tried to think about blue as a little bit more of a pass-through color. So if everything is okay, it should pass through on blue. It's not so much green, because green is a little bit more like a traffic light. You're going to pass through a traffic light. But if I want a sort of a clear path forward, blue is a great color for that. And then the red and yellow are also slightly off red and yellow, because what we wanted to do is have something that felt a little bit more like orange, because the red doesn't mean that you shouldn't go there. It just means that you should think about it a little bit more. And then the yellow also in that way was chosen very specifically for that. And then the other thing that we did is we designed all of the contrast ratios so people with low vision or color blindness could still be able to differentiate the colors. So we took a lot of the cues that Google Maps is already using to make sure that the color contrasts were right, so that people could definitely differentiate all the colors as they were using those.
That's great. So there was a lot of work that was put into it. So like on that, so that I would like to ask, like, where was this work done? Was it just in New York, or was it in different PwC offices? And who did that work, and where were they?
So there was a lot of, we did it in 4 different PwC offices. So the team, a lot of times they would travel to New York for the meetings with you and the Access Lab team. So we had people in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and in Miami working on this. So part of what they were able to do is then go out and rate those places in those 4 locations. And across the team, we had people in experience strategy. We had a writer on the team. We had an experienced designer, a UX designer, visual designer, and then a technology team. So a tech lead and a developer all working on this in a very compressed timeline, because we wanted to make sure that we had a chance to implement it as well. Originally, when we talked about it, it was going to be a design project, but early on in the process, it became clear that we were going to have to build something also in order to make the best use of the funding that PwC was providing. So, so we built that, compressed the timeline, and built the tech in as well to make sure that we could actually deploy something.
Yeah, great. Then your team was really, really great. From wherever they were, they really all worked together from wherever they were. Probably one singular design house. You really spread it out between different cities.
Yeah, and And part of that, I think the great thing about that too is I know that when we did the screening event, all 4 of those offices were involved in that screening event. So when we screened your film in New York, it was also being screened at the other 3 locations as well. So everybody could feel like they were part of the whole thing.
That's so cool. And then, so let's go to when. So when did we roll it out? How long did it take? And so, well, where,
Well,
like, where did we roll it out? How long
so
did
it took a while, actually. I think that we had originally planned to roll it out in March or near March, but then, you know, we got into this situation where everybody was in lockdown and everything changed. But we kept on resolving some of the issues over that time. And finally in May, I think it was in May, we launched the site, and I think it's doing really well. I mean, there's a lot of positive feedback from the site, at least from my side. I don't know what you've heard about it, but maybe this is where we turn the interview around and we hear a little bit more about what you've heard.
so people are really dumbfounded. I think that they didn't realize that we were doing this work and on the site. And so that's what I'm going to be doing over the next little course is, so you're unique because you were the designer, but I'm doing all these interviews with people, and I'm really seeing people. So people from the disability community specifically, I'm going to conduct these type of interviews. So over the course of the next 3 months to 6 months.
Great.
Yeah.
I think one really important part for us too is that, I mean, working with you and also working with the Access Lab team, but also usability testing and talking to people about the site as we were building it to make sure that it was useful as possible, both to people who would be using it to find places, but also people who would be using it to rate places.
Yeah. Great. So the last question is really, why is it important that something like this come out, and why is it important right now that something like this is done?
I mean, I think we talked about this quite a bit, but I think as the world reopens, I think it's never been more important. And I think that for me, I think the reason for it is it's really simple. I mean, if there are places that I could go that you wouldn't be able to go, that doesn't seem okay. I mean, it's really just that the statement I think that we made in this thing after a lot of rounds together was more places for more people, which I think is a great starting point for the whole service, because if we really can make some of these places available to more people, then the places themselves are better. And then, you know, we can all start to go to some of the same places. So I think that it's really, for me, is that simple, is that, you know, if there's a place that I can go that you can't go, then we should fix that. And we should try to find a way to make that experience better so we can all go there.
Great. Well, thanks, John. This was really helpful.